Welcome to episode 15 of the We'll Bring the Popcorn Entertainment Podcast. I'm Brad. This is Josh, and on today's show, it's kind of a heavy one. Everything this week was heavy. X-Men 97 episode 5 we're going to talk about. Really heavy episode that it's going to be filled with spoilers, so we want to go ahead and warn you ahead of time. We can't really talk about this episode without spoilers because there was so much that happened. Yeah. Shogun episode 8, again, another heavy episode, and we're setting up for the end here. Ooh. And then our film review of Civil War, which again was a very heavy film.
Yeah, it's a lot of serious themes in today's episodes in our review point. But let's go ahead and kick into the news at least, because there's some lighter stuff in that. But there's a lot of news that happened this week. Of course, the big convention this week was CinemaCon, so there was a ton of news that came out of that. So we'll get into a lot of that. And one of the things I wanted to kick off with first is Kit Harington has come out and said that the planned spinoff for Jon Snow, the Jon Snow series, has been shelved. And it's more or less that they couldn't find the right story to tell, but it doesn't look like we're going to get, for now, a continuation of Jon Snow's story.
Yeah, I'm not surprised that the Jon Snow series was canceled, or not canceled, but shelved, because we haven't heard a lot about it. You know, we've got 2 seasons of House of the Dragon. We got the Hedge Knight show. We've had a lot of stuff in the Game of Thrones realm announced or kind of put out now, and nothing has come out about Jon Snow. And I'm kind of glad they decided to shelve it and not just push something out, because you don't want, especially after that last season, something that just doesn't feel like it adds anything to his character or helps his character. Because, you know, by the end, a lot of people weren't a big fan of his character. And if they were going to do something, you'd hope it'd be something that brings him into a little bit better light or gives him a little bit more to do than, you know, what he was at the end.
Yeah, he didn't exactly have the best send-off by the end of that series. He was kind of, for lack of a better term, he was kind of a wuss, towards the end, you know what I mean? But I can see where, like, a lot of people were wanting a more redeeming story arc for such a character that, you know, a lot of people did love. A lot of people, like, soured on him by the end, but he was, like, the most popular character outside of maybe Daenerys and Sansa in that entire series. So I see where people are possibly wanting something else for him to do, but I'm kind of in the same boat you are. Like, why force something if they can't do what they feel like either makes sense or is just a great story worth telling? Like, I'm glad they're at least, like, saying, all right, we'll at least pause it for now, and maybe if, you know, the right situation presents itself, that they can revisit that character at some point. But I'm glad that they at least put the pause on it without feeling like they just had to put something out there.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to it if they find the right story, but that's the key, is finding the right story that makes it worth revisiting him and his character and seeing where he's at now after, you know, if you haven't watched it by now, being banished and back to the wall on the other and everything. And we just want the story to be done right if they do it.
Sure, and you know, everybody that watched that show had super strong opinions, especially of the last 2 seasons. I'd say 7 was kind of still good, but not like as great as seasons 1 through 6 were, maybe, because seasons 1 through 6 for me is top 2 or 3 TV shows of all time. For me, it was appointment viewing every single week. I absolutely loved the show. I was obsessed with it, as a lot of people were. That show broke all kinds of records at the time. And, you know, I would like to see some kind of redemption for that as well. But to your point, if the story's not right, let's just pump the brakes on it and kind of leave it as it is, which is unfortunate based on how it ended. But yeah, I'm all for just putting it away for now and coming back to it if they want to.
Yep. So we actually have quite a few comic book related stories this week. The first one is more the real life story with Christopher Reeve. It's called Super/Man, the Christopher Reeve story. It's going to be the first documentary, the first thing put out under the DC Studios label. And it's going to follow him after his paralyzation. So you can see kind of how he found strength to keep going and everything that he did after he was paralyzed. And I would say, as a kid, this was the first, like, celebrity happening that affected me. Like, you know, there's some deaths or other things that happen that affect you. Like, I was still a young kid when he was paralyzed, but he was Superman. So I'm like, how can Superman be paralyzed? How can he be hurt? How can this happen to Superman? It's just got me like, what? This doesn't seem real. He's Superman.
Right, yeah, and it's really an incredible story. Like, he lived a heck of a life, especially after he got paralyzed. Like you said, there were a lot of different, like, charitable causes and stuff that he worked with and did a lot of, like, things activism-wise that, like, you know, like you said, gave him that purpose, and it's really such a cool story to tell. Like, it's like a man that lived two different lives. Like, he was this big time Hollywood actor who like completely broke out with Superman. Superman was huge at the time, and like he was it. He was that, and then like he has this accident and he's paralyzed, and he leads a completely different life the rest of his life, and it was incredible. Like that story is going to be a lot of things worth diving into, and it's going to be a very well made documentary, because when they do things like this, everybody can talk about the merits of their actual films, but when like these types of documentaries get made, there's so much like depth that you can go into for his life, and like different stories you could tell that he was, that he did, and it's all based on things that he actually did in his life. So it's gonna be a lot of fun to check that out and kind of relive those memories to one of the first big iconic comic book actors. You know what I mean?
Yeah, to some he is still the definition of Superman,
Sure.
especially with his Clark. Like the way he did Clark Kent was just because, I mean, he was a tall, big man, and the way he slouched and he gave himself that little bit of a different voice. And then when he went to Superman and he stood up straight and that voice got a little deeper and stronger. Like it was, this is the 70s. It was brilliant what he thought to do to be able to show how different Clark and Superman was from each other. And I still love that. I still love that he was able to cameo in Smallville as well. So he had, a part in that. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to see that kind of side outside of the films, everything else, just to see how he stayed positive after being paralyzed.
Yeah, because I can't imagine having to have your life take such a 180 from that. Like, you feel like you're on top of the world, and all it takes is something like that, like in the snap of a finger, and your whole life changes at that point. And how you deal with that says a lot about, the character of the man that he was, and, the personal strength that it just took, and not just the physical strength, but the personal strength, the mental strength it took to kind of overcome something like that, and not choose to just wallow in misery, but to turn it and make it something positive and still like do good things in the world that he did. And it's going to be an incredible story. And I can't wait for them to put it out and just kind of honor the man and the life that he lived, for sure.
Yep.
So moving on to Daredevil Born Again, some news coming out of the CinemaCon about that. Ayelet Zur is returning as Vanessa Fisk. So she was Vanessa in the Netflix series. When they shot the new season the first time, they recast her, but it seems like now for the reshoots, she is coming back. And we did get some announcement finally on when the second season will be shooting.
Yeah, it looks like from everything that's been said that they're going to start shooting season 2 in November, so later this year. So, we're not expecting season 1 until next year, so we're getting the second season going before, that's aired. And yeah, I'm glad she's back. Like,
sure.
It did sound like there was kind of a mess before they decided to reboot it. Now they're like realizing the fans absolutely love the Netflix series. Why are we trying to change so much about it? Let's bring everybody back we can, because we got Karen and we got Foggy, and now we have Punisher. We have her back. We have Punisher. So they're leaning in, rightfully so, to continue the Netflix series instead of trying to do something completely different.
That is appointment level viewing for me as soon as it drops on Disney Plus. I may even just take the day off work when that comes out, because I love that show so much, and I'm so ready for it to come out and see what they do with it, because it sounds like everybody now has nothing but positive things to say about the experience of filming, whereas you got kind of that mixed messaging from their previous attempt to take it on, and I'm so glad they corrected course and they're fixing everything and just kind of giving us more, but maybe a little different of the Netflix version of it, which is one of my favorite shows, and I'm so happy that they're doing that.
I'm absolutely ready for it.
Yeah.
We also got Robert Downey Jr. coming out saying that he would absolutely love to return to the MCU. Said it's in his DNA. It's part of his DNA. Like, the timing and everything, because he's kind of been saying before that he's kind of done. He did that. That was that part of his life, and now he's won the Oscar, and he's come out saying, "No, I'd love to come back." You got Secret Wars coming in a few years. I think we have to have Iron Man and RDJ back for Secret Wars.
I'm kind of torn on it, though, because for one, there are several million reasons why he would want to come back. Not that he did. If you know anything about what he made during his time as Tony Stark originally, and I'm not saying it's always financially driven, but that man he's one of the best cases of betting on yourself and it paying off huge. Because I think when he originally signed on for Iron Man, it was like a percentage. His contract with Marvel was something like the percentage of the box office or something like that was his salary for the film, or whatever it was, and that paid off significantly more than anyone could have ever expected. And the man made a fortune off of it. And I'm not saying like his motivations are all financial, because he definitely loved playing the character of Tony Stark. In my opinion, he is the epitome of perfect casting for a role and a character, because in my opinion, he's Tony Stark, and I could struggle to see anyone else ever playing that character in any sort of cinematic adaptation, at least. You know what I mean? Voice acting is one thing in an animated sense, but he is Iron Man and he is Tony Stark. And I kind of have mixed emotions because, sorry, I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent here. I know, have patience. But I really loved the send-off that he got in Endgame. Like the whole sacrificing himself so that humanity can survive and they defeat Thanos finally in this grand. And you have the iconic I am Iron Man with the snap in it, like saving everything and, you know, eventually costing his own life and the ultimate sacrifice. I jokingly, when I play games with my friends, say I'm making the Tony Stark play, I'm making the sacrifice play or whatever, you know, we're playing like certain games and stuff, but it's for that, because he had such an iconic send-off that you're like, okay, if this is the end for that character, then I love it. It's perfect. I'm thankful for it. So I kind of do have mixed emotions. Like there's a part of me that will always love to see Tony Stark, Robert Downey Jr. in a Marvel setting, but I kind of feel like that perfect send-off, it's hard for me to 100% buy into him coming back.
Oh yeah,
I mean? Just
like
for that
said,
very reason.
He got a fantastic send off, but maybe we see the Iron Man suit and we hear his voice, but we don't actually see him. Or maybe he comes back as a Jarvis, an AI voice, and
that'd be great.
Maybe they do it that way to include him and have him be a part of it. But yeah, like you said, that legacy and how it, and again, it was 10, 12 years of his life spanning from the first Iron Man to Endgame and everything. So it's a significant amount of time for, that commitment he did for it. So you figured it's still got to linger, what he did in there and stuff. But yeah, it's like you said, we want to see the cameo and see the fun and stuff, but you don't want it to harm any of the legacy that ended with Endgame and make you feel rough about it. Like, because you got to feel that there's got to be some interaction with him and Tom Holland's Spider-Man, and that, like, maybe in his universe, Spider-Man had died, and they have this connection, like they're seeing someone that they've missed for a long time, and they have that connection and bonding. But yeah, it's going to be interesting if they do bring him back, how they do it and how they make sure it doesn't harm that in-game legacy.
Sure. Like I said, appreciate you kind of let me go off on the tangent on that a little bit, because I do have very strong opinions about this and how I feel about how that whole story ended. But yeah, like you could convince me that, with the whole multiple universe timeline thing that they're telling right now, that there's a variant of Tony Stark out there and he's in different universes and he's not dead and others. And I get that. And it's somewhat, in my opinion, kind of a cheap way around it. But, if that would probably be the only way it would make sense, is if they're not, as long as they're not resurrecting this Tony Stark.
It's got to be a variant.
It's got to be a variant of some sort, or in some, like you said, if he's integrated if he's put his consciousness into, artificial intelligence like a Jarvis, and that's the new operating system. Friday's been fun for when they used Friday, but if they use Tony's, consciousness as that, I'm fine with that. Or if they do some kind of variant, or even if it's just like a flashback scene that he comes and reshoots as, as Iron Man or something, that would be fine. It's just, don't dig up the one that just sacrificed himself, because that was too perfect.
Yeah, because we're still kind of waiting on Ironheart. This series has been filmed already.
I know. And
it's been delayed. I think we're not supposed to expect it until like 2026, and it was filmed like 2022, 2023 or something.
That's a long time.
Like, we don't know if there possibly could be any inclusion with him in that, or flashbacks or voices or something else, or how Ironheart's going to play in to the future of the MCU here, because we saw in the second Black Panther, and then she got her series, and we have seen nothing since. So we don't even know, we're talking about RDJ. We don't even know how Ironheart's gonna factor into the rest of the MCU.
They got a lot of stuff in the can that they either need to put out or shelve completely. There's a lot of stuff that's kind of sitting around, and it makes me worry about the quality of the content too. Now, if they want to put it out in a way that makes sense in the overall story that they're telling and they're holding on to it until then, that's fine. But I am a little concerned that some of the stuff that's been sitting around for a minute, because like the hope is it's more like an Echo thing for me, where they dropped Echo, and Echo, in my opinion, very underrated. I really enjoyed Echo. We wound up talking about it here. You go back in the archives and check out where we talked about it, but I feel like it was more of an underrated, undersung, really well shot and made show, and I'm hoping it's the case of that, where it's still a quality show, but they're waiting to put it in at the right time.
Yes, we know they've talked about they're trying to go for quality over quantity now, and they were pushing too much stuff out, but that's a long delay for Ironheart. And you're also talking about a young actress too, so like she's going to look significantly, not significantly different, but she's going to look a bit different because she's still growing up and everything for when the next appearance of Ironheart is. So you finish a series and she looks this young, and now it's 5 or 6 years later, she's going to look a bit different.
Sure, and that's the risk you run, right? But we'll see what happens with that. Okay, so speaking on things that we know that Marvel has coming out that nobody seems to be worried about at all is Deadpool and Wolverine. And there was a lot of stuff that came out at CinemaCon, especially that was the big talking point coming out of it. And one of the lighter things that came out of it was they're talking about making a potential set of crude popcorn buckets. Now, if you've seen the running joke online about the Dune popcorn bucket and what that looked like, and we won't go into details on that, but they are talking about having some similar fun with Deadpool and Wolverine.
Yeah, and they made sure to highlight that Deadpool is the one that designed this popcorn bucket based off of Dune and everything. So it's like, yeah, we're going to get something absurd, a bit adult, and I'm curious which direction they go with that, but I'll probably be buying one.
Yeah, use your imagination. If you've seen Deadpool, you know that can go one of 1,000 ways. And if it's inspired by the Dune popcorn bucket,
but CinemaCon was huge for it. They did a special intro for it where, Deadpool, which is, it's a bit rated R, for what they did, but Deadpool's like talking on they didn't release a footage, so we got descriptions of it. Deadpool's on the phone saying, they're coming back for a secret, and Wolverine knocks him out of the way with some very R-rated jokes, but Wolverine breaks the fourth wall to the audience making this, and Deadpool, of course, does a Ryan Reynolds special joke, and it was hysterical. Make sure, if you want to know, again, it's rated R for a reason, and these jokes and everything they did, look it up. It was a lot of fun, but they also, 9 minutes of footage was shown, and they said,
so jealous,
just laughing all the way through the footage.
I'm so jealous because if you want to avoid spoilers, you don't have to look up exactly what they showed from the film, but this seems to be getting a ton of positive buzz and a ton of positive reviews, even in just the short amount of footage from the film that they showed. Like I said, it's only 9 minutes. I'm expecting it to be probably like a 2 to 2.5 hour film when it winds up coming out, a longer film. But it's going, and I say this without no worrying about being wrong, but it's going to do absolute gangbusters at the box office when it comes out. We're talking probably top, I don't think I'm wrong in saying top 10 film of all time, just based on buzz as far as how much money this movie's going to make.
I'm expecting 200 million plus opening.
A ton. And we've talked to we're going to see it multiple viewings in the theaters ourselves. And I know a lot of people feel the same way about it. I can't get any more hyped for this film than I already am. I say that, and they keep coming out with stuff about it that has me even more excited about going to see it. And it's going to be so much fun. And July, in my opinion, can't get here fast enough.
Yeah, and if you're wanting to avoid some spoilers, there was some merch that was released at CinemaCon that they got to look at. And we got our first look at Hugh Jackman in the cowl, the Wolverine cowl. And even though it's just a still on merchandise, it's going to look much better in the film. It still looked fantastic. We have waited, for those who are huge X-Men, I've been an X-Men fan since I was a little boy, to finally see a live-action version of him in the cowl. It's just thank you for doing this.
Because we didn't get it in the films. That's what everybody wanted. And Ryan Reynolds, God bless you, pushed so hard to get Hugh Jackman back for one final thing, and we're getting that fan service, and I'm so excited.
Yeah, I cannot wait for this film to come out. One that we kind of talked about before, and we were like, well, we didn't even know this movie was being made, and then it's jumping up to June. The Crow has been delayed again, so now it's not coming out until August 23rd. We also have Saw 11 was delayed until September of next year, so we got a few delays. I'm thinking Crow moved simply because June and July are pretty loaded. And they probably wanted to give that a little bit more time because it was going up against Bad Boys Ride or Die.
Yeah, and I'm just thankful that like it got delayed, but it didn't get significantly delayed. It's 2.5 months.
Yeah.
I think it went from like June 7th to August 23rd. So it's still coming out in the summertime. It's going towards the back half of the summer as opposed to like right at the kickoff, which like you said, if you look on the release calendar of films that's coming up this year, it is jam-packed. I think you and I, we planned out the course of like our movie viewing for the podcast, and we have pretty much a movie every month into like September, I want to say, practically. There's practically a new film we're going to see almost every weekend. And
like a big film,
Like, and that's how big the year is for movies. And to see it like cluttered like that makes it a little easier for us, because if that was falling on the same week as, you know, Bad Boys, the new Bad Boys film, and we're like, okay, we want to talk about and review both films, but pushing it out a little later benefits us from a content perspective. But it just goes to show how loaded the slate is of movies this summer, that like it's not going directly up against that, and it's getting its own time, which I'm just thankful it's not like, oh, it's got postponed to June of next year.
Or they just let it be and just let it kind of die in theaters again.
Right.
You know, Bad Boys is going to make a lot of money.
Absolutely.
Every film that in the Bad Boys franchise has made a lot of money.
Absolutely, and that one will too.
And so, yeah, it's kind of a smart move to allow that to have a little time to breathe in August there and maybe have a bit better theatrical run. We still don't know exactly how it's going to do. There's been a lot of mixed feedback even from us. We're not sure. I love Bill Skarsgård, so I'm going to see how he does as taking on Eric. But yeah, it's kind of a good thing for it. Saw, I didn't exactly see why it was delayed almost a year, but I mean, you have 10 others of the Saw franchise you can watch to hold yourself over with
Plenty
until
of
then. So,
but is that the final one? Do we know if that's going to be the final one?
They say it's a final one every single time. So I think it's been the final since Saw 4.
It's like we're going to date ourselves, but it's like the Kiss finale tour, right? It's like every time you think Kiss is going away, they come back with another tour, like, you know, the
final tour,
right? And they sell out arenas everywhere. It's crazy, but no, like, and that's unfortunate, because, you know, like, that's another one around Halloween time that comes out that everybody likes to watch, and seeing it delayed for a year, like, we didn't get a whole lot of information as to why it happened either, but we'll definitely check that out next year and put that on the calendar for sure. But moving on to another bit of news, and kind of a follow-up to a story we had talked about previously with Ryan Coogler making a vampire movie starring Michael B. Jordan. We got some more casting added to that. So we got Haley Steinfeld and Jamie Lawson are joining the cast for this film that is still working out, you know, getting it made, getting it put together. But we've got a little bit more casting news, and I'm pretty excited about both of them being added to this cast.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to see what he does. We don't know a whole lot about the story. The cast is really stacking up nicely. Got some good actors and actresses a part of it. So it sounds like it could be a really fun film to see. But, you know, of course, as we're still waiting for Blade, now we got a couple MCU people with Haley and Michael B. Jordan and Ryan Coogler, of course, who took on the Black Panther films. That we kind of get our in-between maybe Blade movie with this, but again, we just don't know a whole lot about it, but I'm still excited for it.
Sure, and Jamie Lawson's no stranger to comic book movies herself, playing the mayoral candidate from Robert Pattinson Batman film, so she's also like a little Marvel DC crossover there a little bit, but yeah, it's going to be fun. I'm excited to check that. I want to check that one out for sure, because I do love Ryan Coogler's films. Obviously, we love Michael B. Jordan. Haley Steinfeld is a great actress as well. So it to your point, it does seem like the cast is coming together very well, and it's definitely one to keep an eye on for sure.
Yeah. Another one that I'm kind of mixed on, because it's been rebooted once already. Now it's getting another reboot, is the Hero series. So if you didn't watch it, this was kind of our first big original superhero series on mainstream TV that just exploded when it came out. The first couple seasons were really good, really fantastic, but it was one of those that kind of just crashed into a brick wall and nosedive. Like, the quality, the story, just how people felt about it, like, went downhill very quickly to where it got canceled, and then they tried kind of another reboot with it. It didn't fare very well, but now the original series creator Tim Kring is back doing Heroes Eclipse. So this is going to be set many years later after the first series and the second series, and then there's going to be a new cast, new powers. I'm hopeful they do it right, because I love the first couple seasons of Heroes, but it did, it was just so weird how it just fell off so quickly.
Yeah, and I know you and I had talked about this before we started. This wasn't a show that I particularly watched, which is wild considering my, love for, comic book stories and superhero tales and all the things of that. But it was one that kind of conflicted with a lot of the other shows that I was watching at the time, and I never really got into it. But I remember the discourse around the show at the time, like you said, being this show that was super popular for a hot minute, and then it hit. I know there was something that happened, and I can't quite put my finger on it because, one, I didn't watch it, but I saw a lot of that discourse was, I remember when it hit that wall and everybody's like, okay, I'm kind of done with this show now. Mm-hmm. I don't know what happened or what the turning point in that series was, but I remember it falling off hard, but it's still like the people that love the show still like revere it and hold it in high regard. So it does sound like there could potentially still be a pretty good audience for it. And obviously if they tell the right stories and the quality is there, like I'm sure people will come back and give it another chance.
Yeah, and he's got some other stuff to look at with how The Boys, with being a little more adult, has done comic book stuff differently and superhero stuff differently. So hopefully they kind of learn from the mistakes and they give us kind of what we hoped the original series would have been and give us something really good.
So another film coming up that we're both looking forward to is Twisters, the sequel / soft reboot, however you want to define it, of Twister, one of our favorite movies from
We've
the
got
90s.
Cows.
Yeah, I love that film. It's such a quotable film, but they're actually setting up a pretty cool interactive experience in select theaters around the time the film comes out, and they're setting up like these wind tunnel booths you can kind of feel and experience if you haven't lived through something like this, the actual tornado experience, where it's just, really high wind and you could feel that pressure and that intensity of what people go through as you like get ready to go see the film. So that's kind of a cool setup that I think some people are going to get to like experience, I think.
Yeah, feeling if it pops up in our theater, my kids are going to want to jump in there and have fun with just having the wind blowing all around you. And it's a neat kind of experience just to give a little light and bit. Like, this is what it could be like. Of course, they're not going to go too intense with the winds, but it could be a fun little experience. But they also announced that they did get a lot of real footage and stuff from Storm Chasers to use in the film. So we know it's going to be ridiculous and over the top and, not very realistic. I'm someone who follows the weather and does a lot of stuff with weather myself, and I'm expecting it to be ridiculous, but it's nice to see that they've partnered with Storm Chasers who are out there trying to do good and help people in real life when it comes to tornadoes and weather, using some of their footage and giving them a chance to kind of be a part of this film.
Yeah, and give it a little bit of authenticity too, right? And that was one of the things the original did so well. Like, it felt like you were really they were really experiencing that kind of weather phenomenon, which is intense, but there's also, given the level of danger and nature of like that type of weather event, there's not a ton of really well shot actual footage. And the fact that they're using, some people that are, either crazy or brave enough, put whatever label on it you want, to actually have this footage and use it in the film, adds a little bit of that authenticity, which I can appreciate. And that kind of, and in my opinion, adds to the movie-going experience depending on how they integrate it. So I'm excited that they're taking this real-life footage as well and putting it in to kind of help tell that story.
Yeah. I'm expecting it to be a pretty fun movie, but we'll see.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's how long since we've, and they still kind of say it's not tied to the original Twister, but it is. You look at the trailer, it definitely mimics many things that we had from the original Twister, and that was such a guilty pleasure. I still love going back and watching that, and I hope they do a good job with it. From the trailer, it looks fun, and this information, it sounds like they're going for a lot of fun, even though tornadoes are not fun, but watching some disaster film like this is normally a pretty good time.
Always, yeah. They tend to do really well, and I'm looking forward to it for sure.
Yeah. So this year we have Sonic 3 and the Knuckles series coming out. Well, they just announced as well that kind of from here on out, the Sonic films are going to be more like Avengers level type of stories. So they're going big, they're going action-packed, they're going to cram a lot of characters in there. So it does kind of sound to me that this third Sonic film may be the end of our main story, and they're going to just start kind of popping out a bunch of more Sonic films due to the popularity. It sounds fun, but it also sounds like maybe the quality could be going down a little bit. They're just planning like, it's done so well so far, let's just start popping them out.
yeah, let's see how big we can go with it. Big doesn't always necessarily mean better, right? So it could wind up being like we could look back on this and be like, okay, this is the turning point in this where it just kind of took a nosedive too. But I was genuinely surprised, to kind of editorialize a little bit, how big that original Sonic the Hedgehog film was. Like, I still think, I think Mario may have just beaten it recently, but I think when it came out, it was the highest grossing video game adapted film of all time, which is insane, giving the, the hit or miss, the hit or miss quality of it, but just how popular that film was. Like, it made a lot of money.
And it started off a little rough, too, because we got the original Sonic design that no one was happy about.
Sure.
And fans gave so much backlash, they actually changed the design
looked,
all the way through, and it worked out gangbusters for them. But, like, when all that was happening, like, oh, this is not going to be good. It's not going to do well. And surprisingly, it's been a lot of fun. Both of the Sonic films have been a lot of fun. I know my girls cannot wait to see Knuckles and cannot wait to see Sonic 3.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's going to kind of have all of these characters that if you're fans of the games, just kind of all jumbled in to make it, and then they kind of all branch out to do their own thing, which could be good, could be fun, but also, like you said, it's one of those that could be the thing like, oh no, what have they done kind of thing, but we're still excited to check it out and see what they do, but it's definitely an interesting bit of news for sure.
Yeah, because you got to remember, in the end, it is for kids. The adults and those who grew up with Sonic have been enjoying it. It does sound maybe it's going to the direction that's more geared towards kids to make those big, over-the-top, just fun movies for them. But we'll see. They could continue pumping out quality with these. It is just kind of interesting to say Sonic is going Avengers level now. Like, he's got a decent cast of characters in through the series and through the games, but does he have that Avengers quality of characters that could run several big movies?
Yeah, and what kind of existential threat are they going to face that causes them all to come together, right? So we'll see what happens with that for sure. But kind of pivoting towards another bit of casting news that we got this week, we got confirmation. We had mentioned the story before, but Jeremy Allen White has been confirmed to play Bruce Springsteen in his biopic. So that news was confirmed this week. So now that we know for sure it's happening, I'm excited to see what they do with it. Jeremy Allen White is a fantastic actor.
Absolutely. He's
been in a lot of great roles lately. He's kind of breaking out as one of the new top actors in Hollywood, and it's exciting to see that. So him taking on, one of the most popular musicians of all time and starring in his biopic is going to be pretty interesting to see how he pulls it off.
Oh yeah, I love him as an actor. He's got the look. I mean, he can
like
pull off a young Bruce really well. Like I said, I can't remember if I've ever seen him sing in anything, so we'll see how his voice matches up and stuff, but I had never seen Joaquin Phoenix sing before Walk the Line, and he nailed Johnny Cash, so it's going to be interesting to see what he does as Bruce Springsteen, but they couldn't have got probably a better actor to play that role.
Absolutely. So that's one to definitely keep an eye on as they go to make the film and it comes out for sure.
In other news, we have an interesting kind of new project in the works, maybe based off of the popular Shogun, getting some more of these projects out there. But we have the director of Color Purple, Blitz Bazwule. I apologize that I butchered your name because I probably did. He's doing a project based on the true story of Yasuke, who was the first black samurai in Japan in the 1500s. And this could be an interesting, I think it's going to be a movie, going to be an interesting one to watch.
Yeah, it seems like we're getting a lot of high-quality samurai stories now. That seems to be like the next thing that is kind of taking off. But like to your point, it's probably piggybacking a little bit off of the success of Shogun now because, we're loving it as much as we are, and we're going to talk about it in a little bit, but a lot of these stories, when they're done well, it's just so interesting. That's in my opinion, such a fascinating time and such a fascinating culture to learn about and experience. And it sounds like this story is going to be really cool as well. And obviously The Color Purple, very successful, a very popular film as well. Like in the recent adaptation that just came out, he did a great job with that. I'm excited to see what they do with this one because it is. I've looked up the story a little bit too, and it does sound like something that would make a very good film. And if they're telling those high quality stories, I'm all for it. I'm
Absolutely.
so for it. So it's definitely one to keep an eye on for sure.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued that we're getting kind of more of these smaller stories of people in history that maybe you may not have known a lot about, and bringing their story and happenings to life. And I'm a history buff with a lot of things, so bringing something, it's going to elaborate on a story and make things probably a little more dramatic or more action-packed or fun, but I think that's really good to bring these stories that not everyone knows to light so we can get some different looks at our history.
Yeah, and telling these stories that are of cultural significance as well are important to tell. And it's also the possibility to, like you said, shine a light on it where, it's probably never been shown before, like especially in a medium such as this. So I'm all for it, man. Like we get samurai stories when they're told well, they are so good. Like you said, we're loving Shogun as much as we have been, and we're talking about that in a little bit. I know you and I both are big fans of the game Ghost of Tsushima, which was an incredibly popular samurai story video game that was told as well, taking place in a similar time frame. That is such a fascinating culture, like I mentioned, that when they tell the stories right, they're so good, and I'm excited that that's possibly going to get one told about it as well.
Yep.
So kind of moving on to something else that never really thought would be made necessarily, but it sounds like Margot Robbie's about to be a very busy producer, which is great because we love Margot Robbie. And, she already has the Evangeline movie, and she's taking on a Sims project as well. Well, now she's going to also potentially be producing a live-action Monopoly film. Never thought I'd say those words in my life, but it sounds like it's in the work with Lionsgate Studios. So good for Margot, man. Margot's killing the game, and she's going to be killing the games, literally, as far as these films go.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how you plan to bring Monopoly to life, unless it's just a real estate agent who's selling and
could be
rise and fall and have like it's an odd property kind of to bring to life. But hey, she brought Barbie to life and a lot of other stuff. I'm on board for whatever she does.
Yeah, and it's like I said, she's going to be very busy, and she's taking a lot of these video games / board games / even comic properties to life. So she's got her hands in quite a few things. So good for her, man. She's crushing it right now. I'm excited to see what that looks like too. I am also very interested in seeing how they're going to take a board game like Monopoly and make it work. But you have like a film like Jumanji that was kind of based around a board game that wasn't really a board game, but it was board game centric in the sense of the story. So maybe you get something like that, maybe, or something. I don't know. Like it's the details are obviously very scarce because they haven't started making the film, obviously. But the fact that they're taking that property and making it one, like, wow. Like,
yeah, you had Tim Curry's Clue back in the day as well, which was fun overall. But that one seemed a little easier to adapt because it's a murder mystery and kind of easier to play with that. Monopoly, maybe not as easy to adapt, but I guess they got something they feel strong enough about that they're going to move forward with.
It's probably going to be a tale about capitalism, right? That's kind of what Monopoly's about, right? It's the capitalism game, and if you're not fighting with your family when you leave the theater, like, is it really a Monopoly game adaptation? So we'll be interested to see what that looks like as more details about that come out for sure.
Yeah. We also have Nia DaCosta. So her star is kind of rising a bit too. She did Candyman and the Marvels. She is now set to direct the second film of the 28 Years Later trilogy. So we talked about this a few times, of that they're finally bringing this back after not quite 28 years, but maybe by the time the whole trilogy's finished. Could be. She's a great director, and I'm really looking forward to what she can do with the 28 Years Later saga that's happening.
Sure, and we've talked about it before here. We're both excited about these films being made for sure, and getting a director of that caliber attached to it can only lead to good things as well. So I'm excited to see what they could tell over the course of 3 films that is going to kind of wrap up like this type of story. So having her attached to it, I'm all for it.
I still hope we probably may see Cillian Murphy return. He is executive producing them, but we still don't know yet if his character will be returning. But it sounds likely, but we don't know if that's going to be for the whole trilogy, maybe for 1 or 2 of them. But I mean, it's really shaping up to give us something good, because these were kind of cult classics when it came out. It gave us something a little different for zombies, and I'm looking forward to these finally coming out.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll continue to keep tabs on that and update news stories as we get more information as well. Another show I know, Brad, you were really big into, and I've yet to dive into that I really want to, but it sounds like Apple this week announced that Monarch Legacy of Monsters is done well enough that they're considering expanding the entire universe and highlighting more monsters, and it's also getting a second season. So pretty excited about that, especially if you're a big fan of those type of shows and movies like we are, and like as well as they've done. But it sounds like it's doing well enough on Apple that they're really starting to invest in it.
Yeah, this is a big year or two for the MonsterVerse because of Godzilla -1 and with Godzilla and Kong, the New Empire, and with Monarch. Yeah, the MonsterVerse is alive and well. And yeah, Apple is just like, we're giving you season 2 and a bunch of spinoffs. So we don't know exactly how many we're going to see, if it's going to tell individual tales or exactly what it's going to be. But it was a solid series, and I'm looking forward to more of it.
Yeah, and it's definitely one that it's one of the next ones I'm going to start checking out as well in my time. But seeing that first season of Monarch, I've heard you speak, glowingly about the show, so I'm excited to dive into it as well. And if it's doing as well as you say it is, and as Apple's willing to invest in it, I'm all for it. So I'm excited to check that one out too, for sure.
And outside of Deadpool and Wolverine for like comic properties this year, the other one that we're really looking forward to is Joker 2. So that's Joker Folie Deux, or however you're going to say it. I'm going to butcher that all the time, so I'm just going to call it Joker 2. We finally got the first trailer. So we got to see Lady Gaga as Harley Quinn. We got to see Joaquin again, who's looking like he lost even more weight to play the role. And we even got Todd Phillips, who finally chimed in because there was so much talk about it being a musical, because we heard there's 15 songs, everything else. And he came out saying, I don't consider it a musical. It's not that far gone from the first one, but music does play a big part. And you and I kind of talked about it, and it feels like our theory might be coming to light that music is more being used for his breaks or for something mentally that's going on with him, and that music kind of helps move that along, but not exactly a like huge musical number. But we did see, microphones and stages and everything else, so we don't really know how it's going to be, but at least from the trailer alone, it looked like the first film. It looked like it's keeping that dark, insane kind of story, and I really liked what I saw from Lady Gaga, the little bit we got of hers, because she looks like she's playing a more deranged, kind of crazy inmate Harley than,
the actual Doctor.
I mean, we're more than the Doctor. We're just going right into the crazy.
And I'm all for it, because, like you said, we had that concern as you mentioned, that it was going to be more of a song and dance. Like, what kind of 180 pivot are we going to make in this? But it does sound like a continuation, and it's going to be more of helping, like you said, like we've talked about, the whole mental break that he's going through, because he snaps in the first film finally. Like, like obviously there's the big murder scene, and him, getting arrested and going to what we assume is Arkham Asylum at this point, and now we're starting to see his full descent into maniacal madness that the Joker has, and we're seeing that full break into like just that mental state that he's constantly in. And I love the take that he had on it in the original film. So I'm really excited about 2, and this trailer definitely helped with that, because you said we had some of that concerns that it was just going to go like way over here, but it's going to kind of sound like it's going to stay in the lane of the tone of the original film. It's just going to help, like you said, music is more of an avenue to kind of, I don't want to say make light of his, descent into madness really, but it's more of it helps enhance the emotion that he's having, and the way he's processing things. And I'm here for it, man. I'm excited for this one.
Yeah, I can't wait to see it out in October. It's going to be a good one.
Absolutely. So one of the things that came out of CinemaCon that I'm personally most excited about is Paramount has announced that they're making a live-action R-rated Last Ronin film. Now, if you don't know the story of The Last Ronin, it's the telling of the last surviving Ninja Turtle who goes on this last fight for vengeance, really. It's a very dark story. So the fact that they're making it rated R and keeping in that violent and gritty tone of the story, I'm super excited about.
Yeah, I was caught off guard that, hey, we're doing an R-rated Turtles movie. Like, yeah. Because we also got a game coming of The Last Ronin, and now we have the film, so we got a lot coming from the story, which, again, was a brilliantly done story, really dark, really violent, so I'm glad they decided to do it R-rated, because it has to be to kind of tell the story right, because it needs that drama, it needs that darkness, it needs that violence to do justice to it, and I can't wait.
It's intense, because it's it's more or less like, if you think the one thing I can really, and it's funny because he goes by the character Ronan as well, it's that violent outburst that like Hawkeye has, where he has that alter ego where Hawkeye goes on this killing spree as well, like kind of thing. But it's kind of in a similar break of, this last surviving Ninja Turtle. It is Michelangelo, as the last remaining Ninja Turtle going on this last quest for vengeance. And it's just, if you haven't read the story, I cannot recommend enough going out of your way and reading it. You don't even have to necessarily be a Ninja Turtles fan to appreciate the story, because it's so well done. If you're just tangentially like aware of the Turtles, I think it's still, a great story to read. And it's, like you said, it's so dark and violent, gritty and dramatic. And the fact that they're making it R-rated, I'm so excited about, because I am here for it.
I love the design of the outfit too for him as well. It looks so good. That blend of turtle with Ronin, with all just fitting a Ronin kind of costume to a Ninja Turtle can be pretty difficult, but it looked amazing. And I really hope they kind of go back and maybe pay a little homage to the 90s and go back to the suits, more modern suits to do it, because I don't know if you're going to get that same effect with the drama and the violence and everything else if it's a CG turtle like we got in the last, films that we got out. I feel like you need a physical suit, which you can enhance with CG, maybe, enhance the face or the lip movement or something. But that suit, and I think to really bring that drama and everything home, it needs a practical physical suit for him.
Yeah, I agree. And it would help just give it that much extra, like, I want to say pizzazz, but a little extra oomph in the storytelling, right? If you can have a little bit more of a practical design, like you said. But like I said, I can't iterate that enough. If you haven't read the story, go out of your way to read it. It's so brilliant. It's so well done. I don't think the graphic novels themselves are that expensive. It's pretty easy to get your hands on it, or even just look up the story online somewhere. But it's so good. It's one of my favorite singular stories that's ever been told, in my opinion. And I don't put that lightly, because I've read a lot, but it's one of my favorite stories ever told in comic form.
Very well done.
It's that good. And the fact that they're sounding like they're going to make a true adaptation of it, I cannot be more excited about.
Yeah, but it's an interesting time for the Turtles, because we're getting, Seth Rogen did his reboot in the animated film. It's also getting sequel series, sequel films and stuff. And now we're getting a continuation of the live action, but in the much darker, grittier Last Ronin, which still the, first Ninja Turtle movies in the 90s was one of my absolute favorites because of how dark and really gritty it was, to match what the comics originally were. They were dark and gritty, and this Last Ronin story is dark and gritty. So that's where I keep pulling. Like, I hope they go back and just give us a really solid, real feeling world when they do this. And I hope they get the right director, right story, person writing the screenplay, that they just do it really well, because it could be something really fantastic.
Yeah, give me all the Turtles, man. I'm here for all of it and all the different iterations, but yeah, I'm very, very excited about this.
So kind of another series that isn't going to be dying anytime soon is Transformers movie. So at the end of the last one, we got a little bit of not of a hint, they kind of just flat out said it to us, but we now have confirmation that they're moving forward with a crossover movie. So we're getting Transformers and G.I. Joe mashup in a live action film, and that could be some ridiculous fun. It's been a little while since we had a live action G.I. Joe movie. With the first two, or I think there was only two, they didn't do that well, weren't that well received. They were fun enough, but I don't know if they're going to be bringing anybody back from that, or if they're going to use this as a way to set up a brand new G.I. Joe live action universe.
It could be as well, because like you said, there were the first two films. There was also the Snake Eyes movie as well that got made, and they've had mixed success. I know commercially they did okay, but critically they were kind of panned a little bit. I had mixed feelings about those as well, because you and I both grew up in that 80s 90s cartoons world where G.I. Joes were super popular, and it was one of the more popular cartoons of the time. And taking it and making real life adaptation, you wouldn't think would be super difficult to make, but it's been kind of a hard one to nail down quality of story wise. So the fact that we're getting Transformers and G.I. Joes in a crossover could potentially be fun if they tell the story right, like you said. But it started with the tease. It started with the little card that, at the end, the little card that, hints that they're out there and looking to work with, the lead actor in the last film. So It sounds like he may be coming back for that crossover as well. We don't know. That hasn't been confirmed, but assuming storyline-wise that crossover is happening, he's been kind of the vehicle for that, so hopefully he's back in that as well. Thought he did a great job. And who knows? I don't know what story they're going to tell with this, but it's definitely going to be one to keep an eye on for sure.
Yeah. If anything, it's just going to be over-the-top action fun, as the Transformers movies have been. Like, the stories have been hit or miss here and there. The last one was fun, even though it gave us some Mega Man vibes with the powered suit that he got. Yeah. But it was fun and over-the-top, and I figured this one's going to be just the same. But I think the one thing I'm curious most about that I mentioned is that will this spawn a new G.I. Joe universe in live action?
It could. It very well could. It depends on how successful it is, right? If it makes a ton of money, you can probably bet it's going to happen. So it'll probably tell its own stories again. Those entities are popular enough that somebody's always willing to take a stab at them themselves. So I assume that, yes, it'll probably lead to spinoffs and things depending on how successful the film is.
Yep.
So one of the actors that's also like blowing up right now and that's in a lot of things is Glenn Powell. You know, he was in Top Gun Maverick. He was in Anyone But You. He's also in Twisters that we just talked about a little bit ago. But now he's been tapped to lead in Edgar Wright's remake of Running Man, which is a Stephen King story that was told in the film adaptation with Arnold Schwarzenegger in the past. So it sounds like he's getting the lead role in that reboot. So it's an interesting story. I don't know how it's going to... You're going to have Glenn Powell take over maybe potentially Arnold's role in that film, but it should be an interesting take.
Yeah, Glenn, I guess, just got tired of Pedro taking everything. He's like, I'm going to be in every movie now. Because, yeah, his star power is definitely blown up since Top Gun Maverick. Because I don't know I'm sure, and it always gets me when I go back and I see a star come out, and then I go back and watch some older films, like, wait, they were in that, you were in here, you were in here. Yeah. Like, because I don't remember what I've seen him in before Top Gun Maverick, but he's been in everything since. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they redo Running Man. Of course, anything with Arnold, it's
hard.
It's interesting. It's fun. It's also got that cult classic to it. But if they take on a modern take of that book, it could be done really well. And Edgar Wright is a solid director, so it could be a good adaptation.
Yeah, so that's all the news we have on that film, but definitely one to keep an eye on because, like you said, Glenn Powell's starting to pop up in everything now, like you said, and that film, it's so hard to imagine anybody but Arnold like having that role. But you could say that about a lot of Arnold roles. Like, I don't want to jinx it, but if they ever like redid a Terminator film, I'm sure it's going to happen at some point. But it's Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like, who are you going to have play that character now, that kind of thing. But we'll see. I'm excited to see what their take on it's going to be.
Yeah. Another thing I'm really looking forward to that'll be out next month on May 31st is that Ron Howard has directed a Jim Henson documentary.
Yes.
That'll be on Disney Plus on May 31st.
Yes.
If you grew up in the 80s and 90s, you have to have an absolute just admiration and adore what Jim Henson created with the Muppets. The original suits for the 90s. Ninja Turtles was done by the Jim Henson Company. I believe was the second one started out. Or was it the first one that started out with an in memoriam to him?
I think it was the first one.
Yeah, so I think that was like one of the last things he did was those turtle suits. But yeah, just the man did so, and his company did such amazing things. I can't wait to see what Ron Howard's done to tell his story.
Yeah, and like you said, we hold those properties in such high esteem for us because it was our childhood. Like you said, we love the Muppets. We love all those types of stories that he told. His company continues to live on the work in his kids, taking on new projects and things, keeping the Muppets alive even. And Jim Henson was such an important character in the development of these things that we watched as kids. So I'm super excited to see this. Ron Howard is an absolutely fantastic top tier director. So the fact that he's taking this on, he's going to take good care and tell this story in a way that's going to be very heartwarming. And just, I'm ready for that hit of nostalgia as I watch it, to talk about all that stuff and just take me back to my childhood and honor this man that gave us so many incredible things as we kids.
Yeah, can't wait to see that.
For sure. One last bit of news before we go into our TV and film reviews. We got some information about the Avatar: The Last Airbender animated film. So obviously with the adaptation of the Netflix series that's been out, the popularity of the original animated series, The Legend of Korra, subsequent series as well, it looks like we finally got our first bit of casting news for the animated film. Eric Nam, I'm sure I butchered his last name. It's 3 letters, but I'm sure I still did it. Has been cast to be the voice of Adult Aang in the film. And Dave Bautista has been tapped to play the villain in the film. We don't know which villain he's going to portray yet, but that's a good bit of positive news moving into this film that, you and I are both looking forward to.
Yeah, I'm curious to see kind of what they do with this adult version of Aang, because we did get a look at adult Aang a little bit at the beginning of Legend of Korra, because we kind of got the timeline catching up to see how she took over as Avatar. But I'm hoping they've done a good job of giving us a story that doesn't, negate anything that happened in Korra, but gives us a solid tale that we want to revisit this adult Aang after we know where his story kind of ended in the original series.
Yeah, and filling in some of that time gap and some of the adventures that he may have gotten to go on from the end of like you said, the end of Avatar: The Last Airbender to the beginning of The Legend of Korra, and there's this significant time gap in there to tell some good stories. So I'm excited to see what they do with it. And then, Dave Bautista, we both love Bautista as well. Just incredible actor. I love him as a professional wrestler as well. All of that, obviously, with Drax the Destroyer and a lot of the other films that he's in. I'm excited to see him play the role of another villain here, you know what I mean? And to see, what role he plays, what story they tell. It's exciting because I do love those stories. So seeing where we go with Aang in that time gap between the end of Last Airbender and the beginning of Legend of Korra, like you said, hopefully it doesn't take away from anything that happens in that, and it's just a nice story in a vacuum of here's this incredible adventure that Aang had that we never got to tell.
Because it can't be a global kind of threat type of enemy. You would think that it has to be more smaller and local or something. Because if it was that significant, that's a big story to be telling in between here now. That, I don't know, it feels like it's going to be much smaller in scale potentially, just because it just feels maybe wrong to immediately, here's Aang as a kid defeated. We see him as an adult. Well, now he's got another global villain that he has to, world-ending villain to stop. But who knows what they've done with it?
Yeah, it could. I mean, you got to figure it couldn't have been all peace from the time he,
yeah.
You know what I mean? So
That's I'm thinking more little warlords or something that he's got to kind of stop.
Could be. I'm excited for that story though, so we'll see what happens with it. That's the little bit of news that we got from it, but hopefully we'll get a little more info as things move along and we get a little closer to that movie coming out of some of the plot details and things like that. But that's definitely something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, so we hinted at this at the beginning of the episode that our reviews and our breakdowns this week are pretty heavy. I mean, these were some significant episodes of X-Men 97, and Shogun and Civil War was a very heavy film. Starting off with X-Men 97, episode 5, Remember It. As we mentioned, this is going to be pretty spoiler-filled, so if you haven't watched it yet and you still want to watch it, if you're watching on YouTube, you can go ahead and skip over to our Shogun review if you don't want to have anything spoiled, because it's kind of hard to talk about this episode without getting into the nitty-gritty details of what happens, because a lot of stuff, a lot of big things happened in this, and I got to give huge props from the beginning to the voice actors of Gambit and Rogue. They were incredible in this episode. Absolutely. But I mean, as we kind of mentioned in the last episode review, we got that kind of odd split of the Jubilee story with one half, and then they part one of Storm's story and the other half. And we're like, well, there's an episode in between. Well, now we know why there's an episode in between, because after Remember It, you need another episode that's almost like a palate cleanser. You need time to process what happened.
Yeah, and I know it's not coming through, but I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. And I've seen the episode twice. This episode is heavy. There's some serious stakes. It's an incredible story. So we had talked about them, not in kind of a throwaway, but them being called to Genosha to have Genosha being put into the UN alliance, right? So they're becoming a UN-sponsored nation. You get kind of the meat of that story here with, Magneto and, Gambit and Rogue all going to meet up in Genosha to meet up with the UN representatives to kind of put together their game plan for how they want to, present themselves at this UN conference. So there's a UN rep that meets them there. And, you know, it kind of picks up from there. So, like you said, getting into the spoilers, you get this story of Magneto wanting to present kind of a politically positive front to the UN, that we're a united nation. And his proposal for that is to basically reunite with Rogue and have Rogue be like his co-leader, his wife, his love interest. And obviously that poses a problem with Gambit, because Gambit notoriously is in love with Rogue. So it's this whole lover's triangle that's been kind of teased throughout the series so far. And it kind of comes to a head here where Magneto's like, hey, I need you for this. Can you help me?
Yep.
Like, will you be my wife? Like, present this united front for the UN to kind of, do what we need to do here. And she considers it. And obviously she goes and talks to Rogue, and we're getting into the neater details of this story, but it's just so emotionally heavy, like this tension, and you feel for Gambit here because he loves this woman, but they have this dynamic where he can't touch her and they can't be intimate together, but they love each other, but maybe not in a way that may work for both of them.
Yeah, and one of the best and one of the heaviest parts of the episode is when Rogue finally decides to tell Gambit that she had an affair with Magneto, and that, really breaking down emotionally, both of them, just about how, he was showing her all this different stuff at times, and they end up, realizing that his magnetism, his control of magnetism can block out her power so she can actually touch someone and have something. And so she just lays it all out on the line and talks to him about how it was, and you get a really big emotional breakdown about, how I can't touch you, and you get Gambit, still trying to be as sleek as he normally is, just like he pours out of his emotions. We see him open up about it and, tell her kind of how he felt about it, and just kind of ending that part by saying, we're friends. And that was just gut-wrenching, because Gambit and Rogue are two of my favorite characters. I fell in love with them from the animated series and everything, about the portrayal of Rogue just being that strong Southern belle, but that also has all this emotional turmoil because she struggles to have close relationships. She can't have kids, can't really have a family, and that dynamic of her and Gambit always being that just cocky, sly, smooth kind of guy, but we got really emotional with both of them.
Yeah, and they do a great job of breaking that down, like you said, in such a way that you feel for everybody involved here. And then, like, not to make light of that situation, but we get a lot of, with it being in Genosha, we get a lot of characters, like cameos. We get a lot of character cameos in this episode as well. You get Nightcrawler showing up, because Nightcrawler's been in Genosha, Nightcrawler became a fan favorite in the animated series as well, so you get that character showing up. You get a lot of other, like, well-known or semi-popular characters showing up as well. You get a brief glimpse at Dazzler in one of the scenes. There's also a cameo in the skies towards the end of the episode as well, of a character from another Marvel property that could be potentially teasing. We're going to leave that a little bit of a spoiler if you haven't seen it. Look towards the skies and the dark skies in a couple portions of this episode, and you'll see what we mean if you're watching a lot of the other Marvel adjacent properties, which is pretty cool. But we get to this event, and it looks like Rogue is going to accept Magneto's offer. At least that's the implication, right? So she shows up at this gala. She's got this beautiful gown on. They have this intimate dance in the air where they're both flying
to Ace of Base,
right? To Ace of Base of all things. It's so that was
nice touch to the '90s.
The
kids
'90s, yes.
To bring Ace of Base into that.
Younger people watching this, look up Ace of Base if you haven't.
Yeah,
very '90s. But there's this scene where they dance, they share a kiss, and eventually Rogue turns him down. At least it seems like she turns him down. Like, hey, maybe Gambit was right here, and then we get a complete breakdown at that point of Cable showing up, and we haven't even gotten into the side stuff with Jean and Scott. There's this whole side thing of extramarital,
Yeah, I want to touch on these
telekinetic.
before we got into Cable, because on top of all this other stuff that we're going through with Rogue and Gambit, we've got Cyclops dealing with, he's doing interviews. He's the leader. So you have all this going on at Genosha. He's trying to talk to the press and do everything out, but they're hammering about his love life and bringing up, what was it? Captain Marvel, Miss Marvel or something, saying that he was linked to her, but you also have Jean and her clone. And, we have a lot of drama that happens that. And we get a breakdown from Scott, just like, I don't know what to do. Like, the woman I love is not the woman I thought she was. And the woman I loved is back, but she's not the same woman. Like, there's this.
I have the baby with who winds up being the clone, so there's love there for her, and like they're still unsure of where that split happened to where he was with the clone and not the original Gene, and this whole extramarital situation and implications that come from that.
Like, how can he not be having a mental breakdown? Because
right.
There's two of the woman I love, but neither of them want me, but both of them want me, and I've got to figure out who's the one that I'm actually supposed to be with, and like that was wild enough. But then, as you mentioned, Cable shows up, and he's talking to, if you know anything about Cable, it's not really a spoiler. It's been 30, 40 years that it's happened that, Cable is their son, that's Nathan Summers. That's their son. And we get that revelation that, hey, she looks in his eyes and like, you made it, you're okay. Then even if that part of the episode wasn't enough, that's when we trigger the biggest part of it, is that his alarm goes off that he's traveling back, and he's like, I was too late. I'm sorry, Mom. And he gets whisked away, and then an explosion happens. And after that, it just got like, I could not stop staring at the screen. Like, I was already hooked in that episode, but from that moment on, it was like, what is going on? Like, what's happening here?
This is all in a 30-minute episode,
yes,
which is insane. Like how much they jam-packed into this heavy episode in 30 minutes. It's like you said, we get this Omega threat Sentinel, like the Sentinel on steroids, who's got 3 heads and can detect mutants, and he's just taking people out left and right, identifying here and there. And he kind of it winds up hyper-focusing on Magneto, and they're trying to save as many people as they can while they're actively getting destroyed as well, and they're trying to get to safety. And it culminates in this, Magneto trying to create this force field to protect the group of mutants that he's been trying to protect for a while now, that he made this promise that they would never be in fear again. And he creates this shield that eventually gets broken and destroyed, and the implication is Magneto gets destroyed at this point, because they're like, the Sentinel can't identify that Magneto's alive at this point, so they consider that threat eliminated, and then they turn their attention to Rogue, who gets upset about,
she's going off the deal. Yeah, she's mad.
Yeah, like she's like pissed at this point, because she believes that Magneto's been killed, and she has love for Magneto too, and she just goes and takes off after this thing. This thing turns its head and identifies her, and goes to shoot this incredible blast. And this is where we get into the super spoilery part of it. But it goes and creates this incredible blast that is intended to kill Rogue. But next thing you know, you see Gambit charging up on his bike, and he charges the bike to explode, and it knocks Rogue out of the way of the blast to where she survives, but then it sets its sights on Gambit, and now it's trying to attack Gambit, and you see this incredible sequence of Gambit dodging, and he's going up to try to attack this thing, and it impales him.
Gosh,
and
I
it's
still
like,
get
like it impales Gambit, and you're like, oh no, what is going on with Gambit? And in a last bit of desperation, you get one of the most heroic send-offs you could possibly get for a character, where he takes this thing that has impaled him, that is connected to the Sentinel, and he charges it, and he says, the name's Gambit, remember it, and that's where you get the title of the episode. Mm-hmm. And he charges it all the way up to the Sentinel, and there's this giant explosion, and he kills the Sentinel, but it costs him essentially his life. And it ends on this absolutely heartbreaking scene, and it fades to black as she says it, and Rogue's holding Gambit in her arms, and she's like, I can't feel you.
Oh, that was, as you're saying it, I'm getting chills, dude. Like, this was, this is an animated cartoon based off the 90s that was meant for kids and everything then, and adults still can enjoy, but I mean, this was very heavy, and like, you got Gambit perishing, and we have Rogue holding him and saying that. Like, it was just this is why I gave such huge props to the voice actors behind Gambit and Rogue. They acted their butts off in this episode. Such emotional scenes for them to really get in some really heavy, dark stuff. And we kind of know with getting that little cameo Cable and the other cameo that we don't want to spoil yet, that potentially we could see some timelines being changed and modified in the future. But for now, we lost a lot of mutants. We lost a lot of characters. And it's going to be interesting to see how they go forward. But, kind of as we mentioned based on the last episode, the next episode is that second part to Storm's story. So we don't know how much of this we're really going to see in the next episode, or if that's waiting a few episodes from now. But we did get the series creator, who was famously fired before the series aired, came out of his kind of radio science to say, like, if you thought episode 5 was good, wait till you see like 7, 8, 9, or 8, 9, and 10. Like, what? Like, what's going to happen
that's an
in this
appetizer.
season?
I can't imagine the emotional damage I'm going to have from 8, 9, and 10. Absolutely brilliant episode. One of, in a vacuum, the most incredible animated episodes I've ever seen of any show. The emotional heft to it. And if you're fans of the original series and you haven't watched it yet, please go out of your way to watch this, because it's absolutely incredible. And judging by the discourse that I've seen online since I've watched the episode, everybody's wrecked watching this. I think we did a pretty good job of laying out a lot of the beats of the story, but I don't even think that completely does it justice to
you gotta watch it.
You have to watch it for yourself. It's absolutely incredible. That's just one thing we're talking about today, and I'm already emotionally spent just talking about it, because reliving it, I've watched it twice now. I watched it on my phone,
I watched it twice
I watched
as well.
it on my TV, and it's just absolutely incredible. I want to watch it again, but man, holy moly, it was.
I almost watched it a third time this morning, but I'm like, I've watched it twice. I know what I'm going to say about it, but I'm going to give the whole series a rewatch after 100%. It's done. But that is one of the best animated episodes of anything I've seen in a very long time.
Yeah, it was so good. But yeah, that's episode 5 of X-Men 97. It is available on Disney Plus. You can catch new episodes every Wednesday, I believe is when they drop. Is it Tuesday or is it Wednesday? I don't know. I typically watch it later in the week.
Yeah, we normally watch it before we do the episode, so it's fresh in our minds and stuff.
I'm pretty sure it's Wednesdays, but you can check out all the episodes right now on Disney Plus. Now we're going to pivot into episode 8 of FX and Hulu's Shogun, and we can't keep gushing about this show enough. We absolutely love it. We're still hooked, and this episode is no different. It is another heavy episode, and we're going to get into a little bit to more spoilers here, but we figure we're 8 episodes in. If you haven't been spoiled about this show yet, sorry, but we have to break this show down as well, because we're getting to the end. Now, episode 7 left us off with, Lord Toranaga is kind of seemingly resigning to his fate of, I've been cornered. I have nowhere to go. I have no choice but to surrender to Ishido and everybody in Osaka, and I'm going to surrender, and I'm going to give up my life. And we see kind of a little bit more, well, not a little bit, but a lot more of the fallout from that in this episode, where you have these people clamoring and having these side conversations. Is he actually planning? And it's kind of the feelings that we've had coming out of this. There's 3 episodes left in this. He's got to have something up his sleeve, because it can't just be 3 episodes of them working their way to Osaka, which the beginning of the episode, you deal with a little bit of this fallout of, spoilers if you haven't watched it up to this point, his son trying to mount this attack on his uncle who betrayed them in the last episode, and he winds up dying at the end of the episode, slipping, falling, cracking his head on a rock and bleeding out, and, just graphically dying at the end of the episode. And now you're dealing with them making their way to Osaka to surrender. But with Japanese customs, you get a 49-day grace period, a mourning period, when you have a immediate family member like that die. So they're kind of taking this pause and allowing Toranaga to reflect on the death of his son, as well as everybody else just starting to have these side conversations. Is he really surrendering? Are we actually marching to our deaths? How do we feel about this? And that's just the tip of the iceberg in this episode.
Yeah. Yeah, so they got to return to Edo, so his home, so they could, properly, ceremoniously bid farewell to the son. But Tornaga actually didn't show up to his son's funeral because he was sick. So they're saying that he's very sick, he's very ill. And yeah, the whole episode, we kind of go back and forth. So Jon is still like, he's been relieved of his duties. Tornaga's kind of let him go so he doesn't have to go to his death with them. He can, Mariko gives him his books and ledgers back, say, your guys are here. You can take them, you can go. And we got a little depth with him that he wants Mariko to go with him. He doesn't want her, but she sticks heavily to, I cannot because of my duties to my husband, to my lord. There's nothing else. There's only my duty. And then we finally get him to meet back up with his crew, at least one crew member, and it doesn't go as he thought it would.
No, not at all. They have this, I guess they're being relatively well taken care of there, where they make a joke that these guys have drank all the sake in the county or whatever it is, or whatever they say, and they seem like they're just having a good old time being a bunch of hostage, about as good a time as you can being held hostage somewhere, from what they make it sound like. They're just having a drunken good time. Well, the guy stumbles out drunk. John Blackthorne tries to sheepishly hide himself, and and he finds him, and then they wind up having a spat, and Blackthorne just beats the guy as he's drunk, and kind of decides that he's not really going to mess with these guys anymore. Like maybe I can still have a duty, but still get my ship and fight, maybe fight for my own causes. There's a little bit of an argument back and forth between them about that. And he winds up going back with, to try to be of some use in this battle, right? So it's a very interesting dynamic there for Blackthorne as well. But you come to find in this episode now, by the end of the episode, Tornaga's closest friend, Tornaga's trying to get all of his lieutenants in line to sign their pledge to go to Osaka with him. And there's some dissension there. So some of them are like, no, we're not signing up for this. Why can't we fight? Why can't we at least go down honorably and not just surrender? I'd rather go down fighting. And there's this split between Buntaro and his dad, who is Tornaga's closest friend and advisor. And it gets to him to sign it, and he won't sign it. So there's this dramatic standoff between Toranaga and his advisor. I'm just blanking on his name, so that's why I'm not trying to say it. But if you've watched the series so far, you know who I'm talking about. But they have this standoff where he's Toranaga's basically "Are you not loyal to me? What are you doing here? Do you not believe in Do you not believe in me? Do you not stand with me? What is this?" And it leads to a very dramatic scene where he gives them the ultimatum of, you can, if you're not going to stand with me, if you're offering to end your life, do it right here. And he does. And it's intense.
Very intense.
A very intense scene. And you just see the break in Toranaga. He's conflicted, but you have this scene, and eventually his son has to, finish him off with the sword, and I don't want to use the more
asking his son to second him.
Yeah, more graphical terms than what is needed to describe in the episode, but it involves a sword and a head. Use your imagination. But you get to this point at the end of the episode where you finally get this, towards the last few minutes of the episode, you get this very powerful scene between Mariko and Toranaga, where Toranaga basically lays some things out. He's like, hey, we're not surrendering. We're actually gonna fight, but we need everybody on board. We kind of need an all hands on deck. But he's kept it so close to the vest that only a couple people know the actual plan. And the biggest proponent of the plan just gave his life in ways of rallying everybody to this cause.
Yeah, because up until that point of when that, basically a council scene with his lieutenants happened, you really felt throughout that scene that he had really given up. He had stopped. He wasn't going on. And to jump back just a little bit, because it plays an important part in the end, is that John Blackthorne was kind of scrambling now after he kind of went to his crew and things didn't go there well. He's pitching himself, but it wasn't to Toranaga. It was to Yabu. Yeah. And it was kind of a fun, interesting scene, but you also see Yabu turns him down and says, no, I'm not going, because Yabu had kind of been given the guns and the cannons to take to Osaka and turn them over. That was his role going to be. So once he gets all the generals, gets everybody to sign that they're going to turn themselves in and they're not going to fight back, Yabu would take that list, the guns, the cannons, and everything, and just go back to Osaka. And so when John proposed this to him, Yabu's kind of played both sides, but he didn't want to have anything to do with John Blackthorne trying to go against Toranaga, like not doing that. But we come to find out at the end, that was in Toranaga's plan as well, because he know Yabu is a guy who's going to take opportunity when he feels like he's cornered. He's going to go. So Yabu ends up teaming up with John Blackthorne, and then we get that one final revelation that Toranaga knew everything was going to happen. He's like, yeah, and we knew that happened, because he sends Lady Mariko to the ship with them with a letter that you're going to take me to Osaka too. I'm like, again, I've talked about him being the master chess player, and for the last 2 episodes, we've really thought that he was just laying down, giving up, because, part of what he was saying is that there was going to be too many people were going to die that were innocent in Osaka and Edo and the village. He didn't want that bloodshed. He would rather he give his life up so there wasn't that bloodshed, but nope, he allowed his son and his closest friend and advisor to lose their lives so he could set up this plan that Ishido and them would never suspect. And it was like,
it is both brilliant and insane.
Oh yeah.
It is equal parts brilliant and insane, because this is the length that he's willing to go to make sure that this power doesn't fall into to what he believes is the wrong hands, which, by the way, they've told the story, he's absolutely right. But it is insane the lengths that he's willing to go to make this happen. Like you said, his son and his closest friend and advisor both sacrificing their lives to this cause. And then, like, you end with, at the very end, him and Mariko, he's saying, are you ready for your mission? Because it sounds like Mariko is a little bit in on this plan as well, being, like, are you ready for this mission? And she goes, I'm ready. And now it's like, that's where it ends. And you're just like, oh my God, what are we getting in these last 2 episodes?
I kind of touched on this in a previous episode, that I had a feeling when we found out that her and Lady Ashiba had a history as kids, that we were going to get a scene with Mariko and Lady Ashiba where they kind of lay everything out. And it feels like that's what this is building to, that he knows he needs to get her and her alone, Mariko, to Lady Oshiba to change anything. Because we did get a little bit, because I think last episode we really didn't get anything, but now we've got a little bit with Ishido and Lady Oshiba. So we have, I'm trying to think of her name, but the eldest, who is the mom, but not the mom to the heir, because, Lady Oshiba as the, she ended up being the mom because she couldn't give him. She passed away, and she told Lady Oshiba, get away from Ishido. He came from nothing. He is nothing. Get away from him. But that comes after he basically proposes marriage to her, admits that I've loved you. Like, I've been mad about you since, you were first come in here as a consort, that let's strengthen everything here by making you my wife, which you could tell a little bit in his face that there's truth to it, but there's got to be some scheming and planning, because he wants the power. Well, so if he can end up taking the heir out, or he probably still wants to, he can be the Lord until the heir is ready.
He ends up making a statement, something along the lines of, let's do this publicly. Like, let's present a united front to the people publicly to help strengthen our cause here. And, Lady Achiba has been more behind the scenes in the dark. Like, nobody knows that she's really trying to pull the strings herself. And Ishido's like, no, let's just throw a big power play out here right now and just be like, okay, we're united to try to rally as many people to their cause as they can. And it's just going to be nuts. Like, these last 2 episodes are going to be insane. The next episode is titled Crimson Skies. And we're going to finally get a big battle at Osaka. It sounds like if it doesn't start, it's got to start in the next episode, I'm assuming. And like, we talk about all these heavy things, and it's a very heavy episode, but it's also like well balanced enough that there's some levity moments too. There's some lighter moments. My favorite light moment in the episode is, as you know, Toranaga's putting these things in place. He promised the lady that owned the bathhouse to the tea house to get her own plot of land, and he comes through on that promise, and he gives her the plot of land. But he also promises a plot of land to the religious people to build their church, and the plot of land that he gives them is directly next to the tea house, which is hilarious, because when he comes to that realization, he's like, wait, who is that? And then you realize that, okay, Toranaga, you sly devil, you knew what you were doing here. So funny.
Everything going on and how dark and heavy it was to have that lightness. Of so like, funny. Yeah, the church and the tea house brothel are building right next to each other. So funny. And the face on the priest was like, oh no. And
they do a good job of cutting some of that tension. And we haven't even talked about the portion of the episode that was also super heavy. Is you have this intimate tea time moment with Mariko and Buntaro, where Buntaro is obviously not read in on what's going on, and he does not know the plan, which, given everything that's happened in this episode, why would he know? Yeah. But he's sitting there like, man, it's kind of foolish to march to her death. I want to make this like last grand romantic gesture to Mariko to try to redeem his favor with her and like wind up together. And they do this beautiful, you know, tea ceremony where he makes tea for her, and they have tea together, and, you know, out of duty, she respectfully does it. But he proposes that they end their life together because he knows Mariko has had this urge to end her life based on the shame that she's felt. And we've touched on that in the past episodes. And he's like, okay, like, I want to, I'm not willing to march senselessly to my death too. I love you. Can we end our lives together and have this last romantic thing to go into the afterlife together? And she, man, makes the biggest gangster move I've ever seen in my life. Just dropped a hammer on him. And it was like, she basically tells him, almost literally to a point, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but she's like, I would rather live for another 1,000 years than to be associated with you in the afterlife, kind of thing. And just completely wrecking this guy's world at this point, because
she was like, it's not that you weren't allowing me to have the death I wanted, is you weren't allowing me to have the life I wanted. And just dropped this bomb on him. And he's just like, oh
yeah,
like it's so heavy. But yeah, that was, again, every actor in this series does such an amazing job, because you can go from kind of hating Buntaro from hitting her and everything else to feeling emotional for him in this sense, because you feel like he is trying to give an effort, even though it's at the potential end here. He's trying to give an effort to her, and she just demolishes him.
He's trying to atone because he realizes that, you know, and he even asks, he's like, are you no longer under the spell of the Anjin, you know, of John Blackthorne at this point? And I still think there's some unresolved things that happened with those two in the last 2 episodes, but man, gangster move on her part, man. She just came through and just, like you said, took a hammer to what remained of any type of humanity or love that man may have had in his heart, and she just shattered that into a million pieces. Unbelievable scene. Like, I can't sell that enough. Like, that's heavy emotional stuff. It just shows so good, man.
It's so incredible show. Like, we say it every week, but we cannot recommend the show enough. If you're not watching it, watch it. It is so good. It's well worth the time and effort to put into it. As we've said multiple times too, watch it subtitled. Let the Japanese actors' performances shine through, because they are so incredible. Beautiful emotions and acting. They do such an incredible job. And like, nothing against the dubbing actors. What I watched of it with the dubbing was great, but you deserve to watch their performances as they gave it, because they all do such an incredible job. Shogun, all 8 episodes can be seen on FX and Hulu. And of course, with the Disney Plus integration, you can watch your Hulu through there. We got 2 episodes left. We're getting to the end of this series. It's been an amazing ride. One of the best series I've ever watched. Can't recommend enough, and we hope, if you haven't checked it out yet, that you go and you check it out.
Agreed.
Now, to kind of end with another extremely heavy item is the film Civil War. So this stars Kirsten Dunst as a war photographer, and it basically follows her journey through, a brand new civil war has broken out. We have like Texas and California has teamed up. We have basically all the states have been broken up into kind of new groups. But the main part of the story is that we're following the press. We're following the war photographers. We're seeing everything from their perspective. But this was a dark, heavy film, and I still am not exactly sure how I felt about it after watching this several days later.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat you are, man, because it's this dystopian future that doesn't feel like it's that far like into the future. It's not like this is like 2100 and you're like, several decades in the future. This sounds like this could happen like next week, at least the way that it's laid out, and it's this entire like divided country. Nick Offerman plays the role of the president, who's in his third term apparently as president, and he's got like this grip on the country, and it's very political. This film is very political in the sense that you've got these people that have this strong grip on power that won't let it go. You've got states, like you said, seceding and breaking off, and just this incredible amount of violence has broken out. You have those different territories that are feuding with each other, and you're taking it from the perspective of the press. So the plot of the film is essentially Kirsten Dunst and her friend are on their way to Washington to try to get an interview with the president, who notoriously hates the press and has vilified them in the media, vilified them to the public. And if you're into any of the political commentary on that, there's a lot of real life parallels that they're drawing from several different influences, not just the ones you're probably thinking about. But it's this task that they go on this mission to talk to the president, to give an interview, who notoriously doesn't give interviews. And there's real life danger presented in the fact that they could die on their way there, let alone die when they get there. There's a very real danger present constantly. And it's kind of this humanitarian tale. Like they meet up with they find this young girl who Kirsten Dunst saves in the beginning of the film from a suicide bomber. And she joins them on this journey to try to find herself as a photographer who actually looks up to and idolizes Kirsten Dunst. So there's that, how does this young, still not understanding the ways of the world as it's currently, the state of the world that she's currently in, come to grips with, how she captures those moments as a journalist. And it's like you said, there's a lot of heavy moments in this film that I still don't know how I feel about it either. Like I'm in the same boat. It's like to the point, and I know you're going to make the same point. It's well shot and it's well acted, but like the messaging in the film too is just kind of like, I don't know, man.
It tries to stay kind of neutral in the political. Like it's very political, but it tries to stay neutral. But depending on whichever way you lean politically, you can look at it. Probably have different perspective on the film than others, just depending on how you look at it because of how you're aligned. But it tries not to go as deep into that. But it's my biggest problem with the film is that there are very few things that are redeeming in this movie. Yeah. Like characters, you'll see someone surrendering and giving up and get blown away, and then bright, funky, happy music starts playing, and they're just laughing and having a good time after people were just murdered, and they go on about their lives like nothing happened. And that happens quite a lot, that kind of death is glossed over. Like there's very few redeeming qualities to a lot of people. Even Kirsten Dunst's main character, we see her struggle in battle with what it takes to be a war photographer, but there are so many times where she just looks like there's just no care about the lives that are being lost around her, and the same with the girl, and just there's just so much lack of care for life in the film that it's hard to find, I guess, the entertainment value in a film like this. And maybe the point is more for you to be moved by just how horrible kind of everybody is, to think about how our political climate is and how people are nowadays, and really get you thinking about it from that aspect. But, from a film and entertainment wise, just like, I told you right after the movie ended, I'm going home and I'm watching Bluey. And I went home and I watched an episode of Bluey with my kids, which I've got to mention. I watched The Sign with them before I recorded this, and that was a heavy episode. It's like, this was just a heavy week of stuff. But like, to go back, like, I needed a palate cleanser after I watched this movie. I ended up watching Conan O'Brien on Hot Ones, and that lightened everything for me, which was hysterical. But I needed something light after watching this movie because it was so heavy and so dark, and I couldn't feel like, I don't dislike the film, but I'm struggling with what I like about it, other than it's shot well, it's acted well, the sound mixing was well, because it really hammered home, and the few action sequences there are about what's happening. But it's a very linear story. It kind of goes right along the line. Not a whole lot of big surprises, because there's stuff that happens that you kind of figure, but it's like, it was hard to root for anybody in some of these films, and war films maybe not as much as rooting for them, but there's always something that is kind of giving you that light, that hope, that something that you're following through to the end, and this kind of took away all light and hope.
And maybe that was, and like you said, like, now that we're kind of like fully diving into and talking about it, because spoiler alert, we try to save having our conversations about these films to kind of give it a little bit more authenticity. So we haven't really discussed how either one of us really feels about the film until we're kind of sitting here having this conversation. And talking through it and hearing your perspective about it kind of brings some things to the surface for me. And maybe that is kind of the point of the film, is like, if you let things de-evolve into a point like this, to where at this point you're just senselessly killing for senselessly killing purposes to try to be right. Maybe that's the point of the film, right? Like, you do tend to lose your humanity when you let things get to this point. And maybe that's the point of the film, is that's the message they're trying to send. Like, hey, maybe they don't directly come over and beat you over the head with the message, but maybe you're meant to kind of come to that conclusion yourself by watching it. Because your point is, a lot of these people are awful people. They're awful people in the sense that there's no humanity to them in a lot of cases. Not to say that they don't feel things when people close to them die, like happens in the film, because there is, there's four main characters, and one of them winds up not making it to the end that they kind of feel heavily for. And there's another scene that's very dark that also happens when they get captured by a couple people that you wouldn't expect. And it leads to a couple senseless deaths as well, that they kind of feel the emotional effects of that. But for a lot of the rest of it, there's just a lot of numbness to it. And I think that maybe kind of the implied way you're supposed to feel about this film coming out of it, like, maybe if, you allow things to, like you said, de-evolve to this point to where we're, so divided that, humanity is lost at that point, and that, maybe that's a sign to, I don't know, maybe not let things get to that point. I'm kind of oversimplifying it, but maybe that's kind of the inferred point of the film, right? It's just like, hey, like, if you get to this point, because even like the very end of the film, I'm going to spoil things a little bit, but one of the main characters winds up dying at the end, and it's like an immediate moving on to finish the mission.
It's like no emotion to
right, no emotional
death.
tied to it, because you're so in the moment of the intensity of the thing, where this person makes a sacrifice play to save the other, and they just kind of leave the body there and move on to, like, and that was a little jarring for both of us, because they were so important to the story, and they just let them there to go do what they needed to do, and then boom, that's the end of the film.
Yeah, because that's where I'm mixed on it, because like it paints war journalists and press in a good light of the sacrifices and the things they go through, but also in a horrible light of the emotional disconnect from humanity that they go through to be able to do things, of taking pictures of people as they die, after they die, of the explosiveness of war and stuff. But it also just paints how kind of emotionless they can be at times, and it's like, it's good and it's also bad, and that's kind of most of it. Like, anybody outside of them, it's basically horrendous people. But you got that, well, they're okay now, but now they're kind of acting horrible. Now they're okay, now they're horrible. And it's like, because there are sequences where one of the main males, he's smiling in the middle of war. Like, people are being shot and killed, and he's smiling like he's got an adrenaline rush and that he's enjoying this. And it's like, but then you get to see a touching and heartfelt and moving moments by him later. So it's that tug and pull of just absolutely horrendous stuff to some good and light, but just going right back to the horrible.
Yeah, and this is one of those films that I really think that I would love to have like a big group discussion, have like a whole bunch of people, because I would love to see a lot of different people's perspectives and opinions on this. And this is one that, please, if you see the movie, come back to this video that this review video that we put out for this. Go see the film and let us know in the comments how you feel about this film, because I can imagine there being like a ton of different perspectives and a ton of different interpretations of the same thing. And maybe we're looking at it too oversimplified, maybe just based on a lot of the stories that get told that do kind of beat you over the head with the messaging that it's pretty obvious what they're trying to say. But in this one, I feel like it's a little bit more open to interpretation based on, you know, your perspective of the life you currently live, or how you feel politically, or how you feel your everyday life goes, or maybe you're not, you know, maybe you come from somewhere where that's a little more war torn and you understand the perspective that some of these people have. This is one I would love to just like have that round table type discussion with a bunch of people from different backgrounds and show them this film and discuss it together. Like, I think a lot of fascinating conversations can come from it. Yep. And that's something that I think this movie would probably do a good job of, just bringing people together to talk about. And maybe that's the point.
Yeah, because like I said, depending on your political affiliation, where you kind of sit with politics and everything else, you may see this movie a little differently.
Sure.
There's a lot of different ways that you can go in and see this movie. Like, I was affected more on an emotional level. Like, I just felt like horrible afterwards. Like, I was depressed and sad and broken, but I think that also plays into, because it is a story that's modern. It's not that far in the future. We know where the political climate and everything is, without getting political or anything else. Like, we know how things have been in the last several years with politics and the world, and to have something that's exploding up, that's, you know, potentially could be taking place in years or months from now, which we hope it never happens.
Of course.
But I think that also hit the emotional weight even more too. But that's why I'm so torn on if I actually liked it, because, like I said, well acted, well directed.
Sure.
The story is very linear.
Yeah.
A lot of horrible things happen, a lot of horrible people and stuff. But there wasn't, from a entertainment standpoint, that I could say I could recommend from it. But if you really want to see something that could emotionally move you or just make you feel and think, then it's a movie to check out.
Absolutely. And it's definitely one that we recommend people go out, watch, form your own opinion. Like we said, come back to this video and let us know what you think. Comment on our social media posts we make throughout the week about this movie as well. And just, if you've seen it, let us know how you feel. Do you agree with us? Do you disagree with us? And it's fine. So this is definitely one of those films that, like we said, leaves a lot to interpretation. And man, we've just gotten through so much heavy stuff that we watched this week. I kind of want to just call my mom and be like, I love you. But, you know, it's just one of those things that's just like, man, it's a lot of heavy stuff this week, man.
Very heavy. Like, yeah. X-Men to Shogun to Civil War, and even for me with Bluey, like, everything was emotional and heavy. Like, just to throw Bluey in there, if you don't have kids, or if you have kids and you haven't checked out Bluey yet, it is amazing for adults and kids. It has such great message, but it tugs at your heartstrings too. And like, I wasn't prepared for what The Sign did to me before this, because I was already prepared. Like, we're talking about so much heavy stuff. Well, before we record, the kids want to watch A Sign. Let's watch it. Like, okay, I'm emotionally wrecked again.
You came walking in with just this look on your face, and then you said Bluey. I was like, what happened with Bluey? He's like, Bluey was emotional too. I'm like, good God, we couldn't escape it this week. It was just a lot of heavy subject matter this week. Yep. Hopefully we get a little bit of a respite with what we're reviewing next week. But it's Civil War out in theaters now. Like, go see it, give it a shot, give it a view. Form your own opinions about it, and come talk to us and let us know what you think.
It's definitely going to be controversial and have a lot of different opinions.
For sure. It's going to have a lot of discourse around it, for sure, for people that do check it out. So before we get into what's coming up next week, we wanted to give a brief shout out to some friends of ours as well. We've promoted the We Love Horror channel as well. Go check them out. Links in the descriptions of our previous videos when we did that. But we wanted to highlight another group of friends of ours that have also promoted our podcast. And it's called the Kickout Crew. These are fans of professional wrestling who talk about wrestling every week. They are on the premier streaming app on YouTube. They talk about classic wrestling, modern wrestling, just a bunch of friends hanging out. and dear friends of mine, friends of ours, friends of the show. And we have a clip promoting their show that we'd like to play for you right now that you can check out every week on Premier Wrestling on YouTube.
You may not recognize us, but we are the Kickout Crew. We're a podcast that we drop Thursday mornings at 6 a.m., and you can find our videos exclusively on Premier Wrestling. That being said, Kickout Crew is, we talk a little wrestling, we talk about life, and everything in between. So whether you're here to laugh or whether you're here to sit back and ease your troubles, that's what we're here for. Because, it's not our show, it's your show. We do it for you. We do it for the people. And hope you can check us out because, hey, we're pretty funny. And we help ease your mind and relax. And why not take a load off, Annie? And you can take that load for free. So join us every Thursday, wherever you get your podcast. And you can watch us on Premier Wrestling and follow us on all the socials. Because, it's not our show. It's your show. And thank you for checking us out, and we hope to hear from you soon.
So that was our friends at the Kickout Crew. Once again, you can check them every week. New episodes drop every Thursday on YouTube on Premier Wrestling. You can also search the Kickout Crew. Give them a like, give them a subscribe. Let them know that we sent you, and shout out to those guys, good friends of ours.
Yeah, so what's coming up this week is another war film, but much potentially lighter. And it's kind of weird to go from Civil War into the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare because this looks like a silly, over-the-top, it's a Guy Ritchie film. Yep. You have Henry Cavill. You have a pretty stacked cast. Absolutely. But, I mean, from the trailer alone, you got Henry Cavill hanging his tongue out of his mouth while he's mowing down Nazis. Like, it's definitely going to give you a much different feel than Civil War did. But it also feels odd to, like, we go from such a heavy war movie in Civil War to an over-the-top, light and crazy Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. But I'm looking forward just to see how absurd and over-the-top. Like, I'm expecting to somewhat be able to turn my mind off and just have a crazy fun with that, which is, again, hard to say after a heavy war film to say I'm going to have fun with the war film.
Well, yeah, but this is definitely a Guy Ritchie film. It's got... Judging off the trailer alone, it feels like it's going to be a Guy Ritchie film, which I'm a fan of Guy Ritchie as a director as well. But like you said, the cast is incredible in this film. We love Henry Cavill on here. Everybody loves Henry Cavill, let's be honest. It's also got Alan Ritchson in it. Alan Ritchson is in one of my favorite shows.
Doing a British accent.
What's that?
He's doing a British accent.
Yeah, which is weird, but it's technically about like a telling of the first Special Forces team assembled during World War II. So definitely excited to check that one out this week.
Yeah, so we'll be reviewing that on the next episode. We also have Abigail coming out, which is a vampire horror film, which this one I kind of felt, I'm still going to see it at some point, but It felt like the trailer gave us the entire movie.
It really did.
But, I mean, if you check it out, let us know what you think. It looks like it could be interesting, but I wish more trailers left more to the imagination than giving everything away. Because that was one that just felt like, do I need to see the movie now? Because the trailer kind of gave me everything.
Everything.
On streaming this week is the second part of Rebel Moon. So we got Rebel Moon Part 2, The Scar Giver on Netflix on April 19th. I still haven't watched the first part of it, so I need to catch up and watch, kind of plan now to binge both of them together so I can see the full story. We also have on sale digitally this week, Dune Part 2. Exactly. We check our review in previous episodes, just how much we enjoyed that film. It's well worth checking out. That and the horror film Immaculate are on digital for sale April 16th. We also have another horror film that I've heard great things about but haven't watched, is Late Night with the Devil. That's out on April 19th.
I'm excited to check that one out. I've heard a lot of positive things about it too, and it's definitely one to add to my mix.
You have TV-wise, we have Conan O'Brien Must Go on Max. So he's traveling around the world. I think it's only 4 or 5 episodes, kind of short, but it's Conan. If you grew up watching his late night show, of course, he just ended it a few years ago doing his own podcast, which he does a great job on that podcast, which I had, no feelings that he wouldn't, because the guy just knows how to entertain. But that'll be out on April 18th. I plan on checking that out and seeing what fun and interesting things he gets up to.
Absolutely. Love Conan. So that's definitely going to be one to watch for sure. So that'll do it for this week's episode of We're Bringing the Popcorn. We can't thank you enough for sticking with us through this entire episode. A lot of heavy stuff that we've reviewed. A lot of great news stories coming out of CinemaCon. We can't thank CinemaCon for giving us so much to talk about. That was awesome. Let us know what you thought of the news stories that came out this week. Let us know in the comments of this video. Let us know what you think about the upcoming Deadpool popcorn bucket, what you think it'll look like. We'd love to talk about that with you as well. Coming up next week, we will be discussing episode 6 of X-Men 97, as well as episode 9 of Shogun, and our review of the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. We're very much looking forward to that film and talking about it as well. Until next time, I am Josh, he is Brad, and we will see you next week.